Hi everybody, this is Tim Bost with FinancialCyclesWeekly.com and welcome to our special webinar here on how to trade with eclipses. We're looking this evening at all of the dynamics in a big overview of eclipse trading techniques, and so glad that you could take time to join us for this special event. In this session, there are a number of things that we are concerned about, a number of things we want to touch on during our time together. First of all, we're going to take a look at why eclipses are so powerful in terms of their ability to move the markets and their influence on global events. We're also going to be looking at some specific applications of some software tools that can be used for eclipse analysis that I think you'll find very, very useful to know about. We'll also look at eclipse timing factors and how they correlate with market behavior. This, after all, is one of the key understandings that we have to have in order to trade with eclipses effectively. We'll also look a little bit at long-term eclipse sequences, and they're important in understanding market movements as well. We'll look at a technique for developing monthly forecasts from using solar eclipses. And I think you'll find this very, very powerful in terms of deriving an understanding of what the market is likely to do at some point in the future. We'll also look at the extended periods of eclipse activations that follow solar eclipses. These go on for some months after the date of a solar eclipse, and it's important to know about how those work and how you can use them. And of course, we'll be taking a look at some very specific trading strategies that are eclipse-based. We have particular ways of trading based on the occurrence of eclipses, and these techniques have proven to be very, very profitable in the past. And of course, this is probably a good point to introduce the standard caveat that past performance is no guarantee of future results, but that's what we're talking about in this session. So for those of you that I've not met, I'm Tim Bost. I noticed in looking over the folks that have signed up to join us here this evening, and we still have a few of you coming in right now as we speak, so I'm glad to have you all here. Come on in and pull up a chair and get something cool to drink, and have some paper and pencil handy to take some notes. I think you'll find a lot of this information worth writing down here. I'm coming to you from Southwest Florida. I'm a native of North Carolina, and I've lived in southwest part of Florida now for almost 20 years and enjoy the Florida weather here. I have had over 40 years of experience in working with planetary cycle analysis and applying that to the markets and understanding the planetary dynamics and how they influence market behavior in various ways. A lot of my work right now is involved with coaching and providing consulting services both to businesses and to individuals, and especially in working with individuals who want to master the astro-trading techniques. That's really my specialty, is in providing coaching services for individuals who really want to learn how to apply these planetary dynamics to their work in the markets. I've been the editor and publisher now of Financial Cycles Weekly newsletter since that publication began back in 1988. We've been around a few years and have had a lot of experience in tracking the markets and in doing astrological analysis of the markets through that newsletter. I have lectured throughout the United States and in Europe, primarily on trading techniques, also on economics subjects, and on the use of planetary cycles and astrological principles in the markets and in other applications as well. Now, I'm also the author of a number of books. Developed the Basic Stock Market Astrology Home Study course. One of my books that we'll mention a little bit later on here this evening is and Secrets Revealed. This talks about the development of power numbers, which is one of the tools that we can use in analyzing the eclipses. I'm also the author of Mercury, Money, and the Markets, which is the definitive book on Mercury cycles and short-term trading opportunities. And most recently, co-authored with Jim Cummings, the Solar Eclipse of October 2014, its impact on the markets, which is just very recently published, and we'll mention that a little bit later this evening as well. So that's a little bit about me. Just wanted to give you an idea of who we're conversing with here this evening, in case you're new to this work or that we've not had a chance to meet before, either in person or online. So again, welcome to our webinar this evening. Now, my personal goal in the work that I do is to help as many traders as I possibly can become incredibly successful in the markets. I mean, that's really what this is all about. We want to develop tools and share them with individuals who are engaged in the markets so that they can experience a personal level of success and do so with a lot less stress than might otherwise be the case. And also to bring to that process a higher level of self-understanding and appreciation of their own personal psychology and how that works in the markets. And as a result, be able to reap personal rewards, to get profits from trading activities, and to do so more consistently. That's really what I'm all about. That's really the goal of my publications and of the work that we do here at FinancialCyclesWeekly.com as well. And that's really what is sort of the hidden agenda here in this session on trading with solar eclipses. We have this as the overriding or larger scale aim of this work, to really give you tools that you can use to become more successful with your own trading. So the question that we're addressing here in this webinar is, why should we bother to pay attention to eclipses at all? Why have a webinar on the subject? Why should we even be curious about it if we're involved in trading in the markets? And the answer is a very simple and straightforward one. Eclipses are the single most powerful astrological factor that influences the movements of the markets. We've found this to be the case over and over again. Been working with eclipses for a number of years now, and have developed some extensive experience and some expertise in this area. And consistently, we've found that this is, if we had to just pick one thing in terms of planetary dynamics and its impact on the markets, we'd be focusing only on eclipses. So that gives us a sufficient reason to pay attention to them. Now, with eclipses, let's talk a little bit about what they are and again, how they function and why they're important from that perspective. I think that's a good place to begin our investigation here together. When we're looking at eclipses, we're basically dealing with a very special kind of alignment between three planetary bodies, the Sun, the Moon, and the Earth. And it is a constant interplay, of course, between these three. The Earth goes around the Sun, and it takes 365 days to do that. Meantime, the Earth is making 13 cycles around the Earth, each interval as the Earth goes around the Sun during the course of the year. So we've got this constant interplay of the Sun, the Moon, and the Earth anyway, but every once in a while we'll get a particular kind of alignment between them, and what this does is create a shadow effect. Now, this diagram here is obviously not drawn to scale. The Earth and the Sun are a lot farther apart, but just to give you an idea of what this looks like, here we have the Sun in the lower part of the diagram, and of course the Sun shines on the Earth, and depending on whether it's daytime or nighttime, based on the rotation of the Earth, we get that exposure to the sunlight throughout about half the day, or half the daily rotation, I guess I should say. Meantime, the Moon is moving around the Earth, and this is an illustration of a solar eclipse when we get the particular angle between the Sun and the Earth and with the moon in between. Basically what happens is the shadow of the moon gets cast on the earth, and this is the effect of the solar eclipse. Now we're not going to get technical here and try to explain all of the celestial dynamics and the mathematics behind it all. There are good resources in published books and online for you if you're interested in learning more about those particular elements of eclipse studies. But we don't want to get too technical with it here this evening. So simply point out that we're looking at some very specific alignments between these bodies, and it is these three bodies then that we're interested in. With our astrological work, we work with a lot of different factors. We look at the cycles of Mars and Venus and the Mercury retrograde cycle and the Saturn cycle and things like that. But when we're looking at eclipses, it gets very straightforward, very simple. We're looking at the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon, and that's it in terms of determining the impact of the eclipse and the occurrence of the eclipse in the first place. So we have then these special alignments that occur between the Sun, the Moon, and the Earth, and this is what happens for us at the time of the eclipse. Now, with eclipses, from a more symbolic perspective, what we're talking about here is a set of cosmic expressions involving will, emotion, and manifestation. And these are three key words that I'd like to suggest we pay attention to with our study of eclipses, at least when we're talking about why eclipses are powerful and how they apply to the markets, because we associate will and the expression of will with the sun. The moon is associated with emotions, and of course the earth is where things manifest in terms of the physical reality of our lives. So this is really what's happening with us when we have eclipses. We get these precise expressions of will, emotion, and manifestation. Now, what happens with an eclipse is that we get an additional intensity in any expressions of the will. And this comes through geopolitics, it comes through interpersonal relationships, and it's one of the core dynamics. There's a tremendous focusing of willpower and the desire to make things happen and to do things in an effective way around the time of an eclipse. It motivates different people in different ways. We find different kinds of expressions of it, but this is one of the core concepts that we're looking at with an eclipse. We get additional intensity added to the expressions of the will. At the same time, eclipses bring emotional energy into a much sharper focus. We certainly have emotions 365 days out of the year, and those emotions can change many times in the course of a day. We feel good, we feel bad, we're happy, we're sad, whatever's going on with us emotionally. But during the time of an eclipse, that emotional energy not only intensifies, but it becomes much more sharply focused, and we can have much stronger feelings and give stronger expression to the feelings that we do have in a variety of contexts. Again, interpersonally, it may be geopolitically, it can be in a social context or what have you. At the same time, we note that eclipses consistently have a global impact on human affairs. Regardless of where an eclipse occurs and what part of the earth is under its shadow, it impacts the entire globe to one degree or another. So eclipses have this powerful impact upon this plane of manifestation on the earth in the realm of human affairs, and that's why they're very, very important. And really this is where the connection with the markets actually comes into play. When we look at these core dynamics of an eclipse, this is what we find expressed through the markets. So when we look at market activity, with or without solar eclipses, what we can say is that the activity of the markets itself has a global scope. And the fact is that all markets right now are interrelated. We can't have a shift in the European markets, for example, and not expect that to resonate or be reflected with the trading action that takes place in the U.S. And we can have changes in the market dynamic in Indonesia or in Southeast Asia or in India, and that will resonate with the markets in other parts of the world. And it's very interesting as we study the markets astrologically and look at the various stock exchanges. A number of the exchanges around the world end up having very, very similar birth dates and solar alignments in their charts. So this is something that really goes with the nature of the markets themselves, that they impact things on a global level. At the same time, the market activity is a very large-scale expression of individual will and in the intention of individuals and groups and corporations. And so what we're doing is trying to further business activity where everybody has an agenda. They want to get a higher price for what they're selling. They want to be able to buy at a lower price. These are expressions of will and intention, and because it's happening in the aggregate of the entire activity of the markets, it happens at a very, very large scale. And when we look at that market activity, we understand that the primary driver of the markets is the force of emotion. Even though it's an expression of the will, and even though things are linked on a global scale and there's a lot of rationality attached to the market activity, fundamentally it comes down to two core emotions, fear and greed. If we're fearful that the market may not have as rosy a future as we might want to anticipate, then stock prices tend to come down. Fear inspires bearishness. If we look at rising prices in the market and are convinced they're going to keep on going up, then this triggers the emotion of greed, and this is associated with market bullishness. So what happens then is that we get this combination of the global impact, that is the plane of manifestation, the expression of the will through the markets, which is the solar dynamic, and the expression of the emotions, which drives the fluctuations in the markets, which is the lunar dynamic. And so essentially we can say then that the forces that get experienced through eclipses are actually one and the same forces that move the markets. Now this is maybe a little bit of a stretch conceptually, but I think this is really what gives eclipses so much power in moving the markets, and why it's so important to pay attention to them if we're interested in fine-tuning our astro trading to enhance the profitability of our trading activity. This is what is really behind it all, as far as I can tell. So that's why we're interested in looking at eclipses in the first place. Now, as we look at eclipses, there are some general considerations that we want to keep in mind. We're going to touch on these briefly here because I think it's important that we all be on the same page as we look at understanding the power of eclipses and how we can use them in our trading to be more profitable, to be more effective with our trading. We're not going to go into a lot of detail about these, but I think it's important to make sure that you've at least considered some of these notions along the way. The first thing is that solar eclipses are more powerful than lunar eclipses. We get both types of eclipses, an eclipse of the moon and an eclipse of the sun. They occur with some frequency, but typically when we're looking at market influences, we find that the solar eclipses tend to be more powerful than the lunar eclipses as a general rule. Now, that's not to say that lunar eclipses don't have an impact on the markets. Sometimes that impact can be quite profound, but again, this is a basic level of consideration. We are going to pay more attention to the solar eclipses than we will with the lunar eclipses for a variety of reasons. But essentially it's because that the solar eclipses tend to be more impactful, more powerful than the lunar eclipses are. Solar eclipses, by the way, only happen at the time of a new moon. Not every new moon is a solar eclipse, obviously, but every solar eclipse is also a new moon. So that's a fact that we need to keep in mind. Contrary-wise, lunar eclipses only happen at the time of the full moon. Again, not every full moon is a lunar eclipse, but every lunar eclipse is also a full moon. And here's an interesting fact: we don't have lunar eclipses in isolation. they will always accompany a solar eclipse. Now, the full moon is always roughly 2 weeks away from the new moon, so when we have a solar eclipse, we can have a lunar eclipse 2 weeks prior to it at the preceding full moon, prior to the new moon solar eclipse, or we can get a lunar eclipse 2 weeks after the solar eclipse, with the lunar eclipse coming after it. So we'll get variations on that. Sometimes we'll get a lunar eclipse both before and after a solar eclipse, but more typically it's one or the other, either 2 weeks prior to or 2 weeks after the date of the solar eclipse. But just remember that each lunar eclipse always, or every lunar eclipse, happens at a full moon, and that they will always be occurring along with a solar eclipse. We never get a lunar eclipse happening by itself without a solar eclipse occurring nearby. Now, a total eclipse is typically a much more powerful phenomenon than a partial eclipse. We showed the diagram a moment ago, the shadow hitting the Earth. Sometimes that shadow, the focal point, will actually be above the surface of the Earth, and what that does is create a partial eclipse effect. So we see the sun being partially blotted out. During a total eclipse, the disk of the sun is completely concealed by the body of the moon as seen from the Earth's perspective, so we get a much more defined and impactful shadow with that. So essentially then, the total eclipses tend to be much more powerful in affecting the markets than partial eclipses are. But we still pay attention to the partial eclipses, and that doesn't mean they can't be powerful in and of themselves. It's just a question of degree here that we're talking about as a general consideration in looking at eclipse dynamics. Now, the other thing to remember here is that there are at least 2 solar eclipses that take place each year. The dates will vary from year to year. They go through very set cycles, and we can predict well ahead of time when they will occur, which is one of the things that makes them valuable to us as astro traders as we look at these eclipse dynamics. And sometimes we will get back-to-back eclipses occurring in 2 consecutive months. At the 2 consecutive new moons. But as a rule of thumb, we can look for about 2 solar eclipses every year. Sometimes, depending on how the calendar year falls and the dates of the eclipses, there can be several more than that. But essentially, we look for them roughly 6 months apart as they occur during the year. Now, the astrological effects of eclipses can take place after the eclipse itself happens, of course, but here's the interesting thing about it. In many cases, we'll see the effects of an eclipse occurring before the eclipse itself actually takes place. And this is a very, very important thing to remember in working with eclipses, because when we see this kind of dynamic at play, and we see the effects of the eclipse happening before the event itself, it kind of boggles the mind a bit. You know, typically when we look at cause and effect, we expect it to be sequential in terms of the chronology of events. First we have the cause, then we have the effect. But when we work with eclipses, we will just as often see the effect and then the cause, and then more effects after the cause. So it's a very interesting kind of phenomenon, and it's something that defies logic in one sense, but also it's quite remarkable in our realm of experience. And as we begin to work with eclipses, we will often discover that there are other things that adhere to this same model. Very, very interesting phenomenon. And certainly this is one of the more important things to pay attention to in terms of these general considerations when we apply eclipses to the actions of the markets and to our trading activity in the markets. So, The question then, with these basic considerations in mind, and some of the key understanding of eclipses, then at least mentioned during our introduction here, the real question and our real concern here is what the best strategies are for actually trading with solar eclipses. And that's what we want to focus on, because there are a number of different approaches, and through the work that we've done here at Financial Cycles Weekly over the last several decades, we've explored a lot of different configurations of this, and what we're sharing here during this webinar is kind of the cream of the crop. These are the concepts that we have found to be the most useful and the most reliable in terms of providing some real opportunities for astro traders. So that's what we're paying attention to. First of all, when we look at eclipses, our first concern is, where is it happening? And when we're looking at where here, we're talking specifically where in the zodiac does a particular eclipse occur. And it can be at any degree of the zodiac, from 0 degrees Aries all the way through Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and Virgo, all the way into to Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. So we have all the signs of the zodiac, and we work with the zodiac dynamic as a span of 360 degrees. So each of those 12 signs of the zodiac is exactly 30 degrees wide, and we can pinpoint the position of the eclipse then in terms of a decimalized notation, as well as the name of the zodiac sign. But we're looking essentially at that zodiacal location of the eclipse. Where does it take place? Again, as seen geocentrically, that's from the Earth's perspective here, and we're interpreting things from that earthbound perspective when we work with eclipses, because this is where the eclipses have the greatest impact. And as we do so, we're interested in where we're going to find this against the planetary, or rather the stellar backdrop of the zodiac. So we look at the zodiac location, and as we do so, we can use this location of the eclipse in a variety of ways, all of which can inform our trading and our effectiveness in the markets quite significantly. First of all, we compare this point, the location of the eclipse, to the first trade charts or the other horoscopes that are relevant to our trading activity. When we're trading equities, we rely very, very heavily on the first trade horoscopes. At times when we're working with futures, we'll be looking at other charts for the initial setup of a particular exchange or something of that sort. There's some historic charts that come into play. But in every case, if we have a base chart that refers to a particular market, a particular equity, a particular stock exchange, or what have you, then we're going to be looking at where this eclipse falls in that chart. And we simply take that zodiacal degree position and just write it in right on the chart wheel of whatever it is that we're interested in examining, and then we study what it does when it's there. We look at the influence of this point of the eclipse, of course, in the first trade charts and the other relevant charts, but also as individual astro traders, it's very important to take a look at the eclipse in terms of how it impacts our individual natal charts as well. This is part of what we call the trading triad here at FinancialCyclesWeekly.com. We pay attention not only to the trade and to the market activity as a whole, but also to the astrology that behind the individual trader. What makes you tick as an individual? What's reflected in your chart in terms of your ability to handle risk, to take chances, to be effective in making trading decisions? And when we drop in the eclipse then into your natal chart, what happens is we'll often highlight key dynamics within your chart, and as it does so, then you may come under more stress in those particular areas, or you may sense that there are bigger opportunities in those areas, depending on what planets in your natal chart are involved. So this is an important step then in really being prepared to work with an eclipse effectively. We want to see what it does to me individually as well, because after all, I'm the one pulling the trigger, taking the trade, putting the money at risk. And so we want to see, does that impair my ability to do that, or does it enhance my ability to do that, based again on that zodiacal position of the eclipse. This is our starting point for this concern here. And then finally, we look at what we call zodiac price equivalence to that particular position in the zodiac. And we use these calculations as guidelines then for setting our stop-loss orders in ways that can correspond to planetary price positions for support and resistance in the market that we are trading. This may sound a little complex. Essentially, this is some of the work that's outlined in the book Gann's Secrets Revealed. We talk about how these zodiacal positions relate to particular price points and how we go about calculating them in order to determine what's likely to happen with price movements of whatever it is that we are trading. Let's take a look at an example here. For example, we have coming up in just a couple of days here on October 23rd, a solar eclipse. This is a partial solar eclipse, and it occurs here not just on October 23rd, but in the zodiac at 0 degrees, 24 minutes of the sign of Scorpio. Now, Scorpio is a sign of the zodiac that begins at 210 degrees and counting upward from 0 degrees of the zodiac being at 0 degrees Aries. This is the 8th sign along the way, and so we've got 210 degrees as the starting point of the sign of Scorpio. And so what we would do first of all here is we look at what this point of 0 degrees Scorpio, 024 Scorpio, where does it fall in your natal horoscope? If you're the trader in question here, we want to see how that impacts you personally. Does it conjoin a planet there? How does it relate to what's going on in your chart? And then what points of contact does it make in the charts for the stocks that you're trading or other vehicles that you're currently involved, as we just described this process. So we'll start with that. And that's a very individualized thing. But suffice it to say that this is the first step that we take. We analyze that degree position in that way. Then we begin our process of our analysis of the derived numbers and price points based on this position in the zodiac by converting 0 degrees 24 minutes of Scorpio to decimal notation. And as we say, this starts at 210 degrees, so the decimal notation here would be 210.40. 24 degrees is 40% of 60 degrees, and per degree, 60 minutes per degree. So we convert this then to 210.40. And this gives us then a decimalized numerical equivalent of the position of the eclipse. Now, we can say that anything that's trading at a price of $210.40 on the date of the eclipse itself is clearly resonating with that eclipse. But we can extend this to other price levels as well. And this is important because not everything trades in exactly the same price range. If we're talking about trading at a price of $210, then this obviously does not apply to the S&P 500 or to the price of gold or to the price of Apple computer. There are a number of things here that don't match that specific price. They're either a lot lower than that or a lot higher than that. So we can extend this by moving the decimal point in that 210.40 and or adding zeros to the equation. So we move the decimal point and add zeros to it, and so we can get corresponding levels here by moving the decimal point a couple places to the left. $2.10, $21.04, $2,104, $21,040, etc. We can take it higher or lower as we see fit in order to explore some of those potential price correlations. And in every one of these cases, then, we can say that symbolically this number relates to this specific position in the zodiac, ergo to this specific solar eclipse. And so it gives us a way of fine-tuning where we're looking when we're looking for the eclipse impacts. Well, then we can also find additional correspondences by adding increments of 360 to these original numbers that we've just come up with. So, when we add 360, for example, to the 210.40, we would get, first of all, 570.40. We add another 360, we get to 930.40, then to 1290.40, to 1650.40, to 2010.40, etc. So we move through the various increments there by adding 360. Now, the reason we do this is 360 degrees in a circle. We come full circle and come back to the starting point, so it ends up not being an increment in terms of the zodiac itself, but we find these additional price levels that give us points of correspondence here. Now, as we work with this, then what we're looking at, it can be target prices for trades. It can be sensitive zones for support and resistance that can help us set our stop loss levels. There are a number of ways we can integrate this information once we derive it and say these are the specific numbers, the power numbers that connect with this particular solar eclipse. And again, this is described, and how to do this is set up in some detail in this little book called Gann Secrets Revealed, Volume 1, Beyond Symbolism in Financial Astrology. This is available from Amazon.com, and I recommend it to you if you're interested in exploring the mechanics of these mathematical relationships. And that's really the whole focus of this little book. It's how to do those calculations so that you can come up with the planetary price correlations that you can apply in your own trading strategies. Now, there's an additional way that we can look at these dynamics here in terms of the correlations between specific points in the zodiac and prices in the markets as well. This is the universal clock. And universal clock is the name that Jeannie Long has given this methodology. It's a refinement and derived from the work that W.D. Gann did some decades earlier with his Wheel of 24. Gann used a number of geometric diagrams and charts to map out price relationships in the markets, and one of those was what we call the Wheel of 24. It's basically a wheel with 24 spokes or sections to it, or we call them pizza pie slices. This is the way the universal clock pattern occurs in the Fibonacci Trader Galactic Trader software. It's a module in the Galactic Trader. It's available from PAS. This was the software that was originally developed by Jeannie Long, and in this case to present the Gann wheel here. On the lower left here, you'll note I put a little arrow in, says Solar Eclipse and Venus. Note that just above the arrow is that number 210. That shows us that this is that 0 degrees of Scorpio position at that 210 mark. And what we're seeing here then is actually two circles, one superimposed on the other, or really three circles. The sun superimposed on the moon for the solar eclipse, and then Venus is sitting on top of that. And what this indicates then, at the time of this solar eclipse, on the 23rd of October, we have the eclipse conjoining transiting Venus as well. So that comes into play very, very strongly. And what we see here then is we look in this wheel, we look down that spoke, and we can see the various price increments moving from the inside out. We've got 15 and 39 and 63 and 87, 111, 135, 159, 183, etc., all the way out to that outer ring to 351 here. or even farther out to that. We've got price increments as well. And now the thing about this as a software program and using it in that way is that you can calibrate on the screen the price point that you want to start with. So I always try to divide it by 360 to get an even number that relates to the wheel of 24 in an accurate fashion, so that I've got that clear correlation between the planetary positions and the prices that I'm looking at. But you can start this to calculate based on a beginning point of any price that you want. So if you're trading a very, very high-flying market, or a market that has shares that are denominated in the thousands of dollars per share, then this can help you with that as well. And again, all we're doing here is saying this is the point of the eclipse. In that lower left-hand corner there with the arrow pointing to it. This is where the eclipse falls in the zodiac, and this is what this geometric mathematical model creates for us with the universal clock. That empowers us then to pick additional price points that may be of interest to us in working with the eclipse. And when I say additional price points there, we're oftentimes looking at translating them into specific levels of support or resistance to protect the trading capital. It can be a very, very useful tool in that regard. So we have that connection then, just starting with this basic notion of where is the eclipse in the zodiac. There are lots of things we can do with that one little piece of information and begin to derive an understanding of our expectations for the market action on that basis. Now, once we have done that and looked at the location of the eclipse in the zodiac, we look at its location on Earth. And in other words, what we're looking for is where are the locations on Earth from which the eclipse will be visible. Now, not all eclipses, or I think it's more accurate to say that for every eclipse there are certain locations on Earth where it is simply not visible. Now, of course, in the path of visibility, what we're talking about is the place where there's a shadow cast on the surface of the Earth, and the sun disappears completely for the solar eclipse. That's for a total solar eclipse. Or in a partial solar eclipse, we get the point where there is the maximum amount of shadow over the sun, even though it does not get blotted out totally, as we find with the total eclipse. In either case, we're interested in those areas underneath where the eclipse occurs, where it can be seen in the sky. And as we do that, then we can kind of graph that out. In this case, the red line is the central line of a partial solar eclipse that occurs on October 23rd, 2014. Because it is a partial eclipse, even under the areas of the red line here on the chart, the sky will not be completely dark, but these are the areas where it will be the strongest eclipse impact. If we take varying gradations of the eclipse, and we can extend outward from that curving line in both directions, essentially what this does is cover all of the North American continent, is under at least part of the shadow of the eclipse. Whether you happen to still have daylight at that time or not, depends on the location, but it's a very, very powerful dynamic. So with this red line, then, this is where we find the highest degree of impact from the eclipse, and in this case, it gives us an additional tool to work with. Now, at times we'll find eclipses and eclipse paths that go over the polar ice cap, or the North Pole, the South Pole, and there's no market activity obviously taking place right under that path. But what we can do is extend the beginning and end points of that path. Pardon me, get a sip of water here. Excuse me. And by extending them along the lines of longitude and latitude, we can determine locations on the surface of the Earth where the eclipse can have a maximum level of impact as well. So it's a very, very interesting part of our study and a way to approach things. Now, the reason we want to know about the location of that eclipse path is because this is where there's more stress, there's more pressure put on those areas, and in many cases, too, we're dealing with raw materials, essential commodities, or particular kinds of development that take place in the geographic areas indicated by the eclipse. Now, with this cutting right through the American Midwest, we're going to be paying a lot of attention, obviously, to the agriculturals, the grain crops, and what have you that come in association with the eclipse, and the the livestock, live cattle, pork bellies, and whatnot associated with that as well. If you're trading commodities futures, then in a nutshell, this eclipse can have a very, very powerful impact on that, especially if you are engaged in the agriculturals. So this is one of the tools then that we have at our disposal for analyzing eclipses by using these eclipse paths. Now, these have been published in some books as well as being available in a variety of software programs that will do these calculations for you with where the paths fall. Then, in addition to that, we review what is known as the Saros series for the eclipse. The Saros series is a very interesting phenomenon because eclipses operate in specific patterns, and they will move from one pole of the Earth to the other. So what will happen here is that we'll get an eclipse that takes place, let's say, near the South Pole, and then the Saros series is a sequence of 17 years. So 17 years later, there's going to be another eclipse occurring in that same series. It won't take place at exactly the same sign or spot in the zodiac, and it won't be over the same part of the surface of the Earth, but there is a connection between the two. And so what we do is track the beginning points of those Saros series, because the series themselves overlap tremendously, because it's a 17-year cycle. If we get an event in the Saros series this year, then we're going to have to wait 17 years from now before we get the next event to take a look at. But we can go back in history and look at what happened 17 years ago with that eclipse, and in some cases we can track it all the way back to the very first time there was a solar eclipse in a given Saros series, and then it gives us a means of formulating some understanding about that. Now, with this current eclipse, the one coming up here at 0 degrees of Scorpio, for example, this is the beginning of the Saros series for this one. And the thing I found fascinating here is how young the Saros series is and how new this whole process is, because oftentimes as we look at these Saros series connections, we're going back to 600 AD or 1702 or something of that sort. So we have a date that goes back considerably in history in many cases, and it gives us this much broader perspective on things. But for this current eclipse series, this is Saros series 153, and the beginning eclipse took place in 1870. Now, none of us were alive in 1870, but it's not that far back in terms of our memory, and we have some pretty good records of what was going on at that time. And that's been one of our points of focus as we've studied this upcoming solar eclipse here. We want to be able to pay attention to these dynamics, and so what we do is look at the entire sequence of horoscope charts relative to that Saros series. In this case, it's series 153. I think it was back in the spring when we looked at another eclipse. The Saros series began in 1602 or something like that, a much longer time ago, and so it was a little more difficult to reconstruct the charts that went with that. At any rate, the Saros series is very, very important for us as traders, because what we can do is look at what was going on economically, geopolitically, and in the markets in some cases with the earlier eclipses that occurred in this specific Saros series, and to a certain extent history tends to repeat itself. So we want to at least be aware of what has occurred in previous times so that we can be alert to the potential booby traps and to the profitable possibilities that await us shorter term in today's world. So we also can look at lunar returns to the solar eclipse. And this is a very, very interesting tool. It's something that we developed about 12, 13 years ago as we were doing some eclipse work at that time and trying to study some of the effects with the lunar, with the solar eclipses. And we realized that once a month, the moon will return to the same position that it was in at the exact time of the solar eclipse. So we can track that then and look at the moon's position every time it goes back to the position it held at the exact time and date of that solar eclipse. And we can use that information about that chart then to provide a sense of balance and harmony and to forecast some trends, for an individual on that basis. We can do a lunar return with an individual's natal chart, but then with the eclipse, what we're doing is looking at the times that the eclipse power comes into play again. So by using this specific methodology, we can come up with some very, very accurate forecasts in terms of what the market temperament is likely to be like in a given time in the future. So this is a very, very powerful tool. It's something that's, we work with it on a regular basis in studying the eclipses, and I personally will use lunar return sessions with a lot of my individual clients when I'm coaching them or providing consulting services for them. We will oftentimes look at a lunar eclipse cycle for them so that they get a sense of how to manage their emotional state and how to make better decisions. And it gives us a kind of a neat checkup point every 4 weeks with the lunar eclipse. So this is something I suggest that you do if you are interested in tracking eclipses and figuring out how to use them in your own trading. Be sure to take a look at the lunar return cycle to that eclipse. By the way, we use the regular moon here. We don't use the parallax with that. Then we also have the ability to compile and list activation dates. So the next suggestion is once you've worked with that initial work with the lunar eclipse, then what we want to do is compile a list of all the times that there are key planetary transits to the specific points that occur in the horoscope for the solar eclipse itself. So in other words, the eclipse may be at 0 degrees of Sagittarius, and we may find Saturn at 12 degrees of Leo, and Jupiter in another location in the chart, and Mercury in another location. What we do is we take a note of all those locations, and then we watch for planetary transits to those specific locations, because this reactivates a lot of the energy that comes from the horoscope for the solar eclipse itself. And when we do that, then it gives us specific elements that we can use in our timing of the markets and timing of decision making in general. So that can be a very, very important step to take. Always when we do our planning, we like to ask this question about what comes next, and this is one of the ways of addressing that and making it a little bit more palatable for a lot of astro traders who work with eclipses. So having a list of those dates is very, very important. Then we also remember our general eclipse considerations. We talked about that whole list of them a little earlier in our session here, the various considerations that we want to keep in mind. And one of those here is this notion that the astrological effects of eclipses take place both after the eclipse occurs and before the eclipse occurs as well. And that's something that is very, very important. It's kind of unique to the astrological understanding of the impact of eclipses. But once we can master that, it can really give us a significant edge in the markets. So let's see if I can bring up this chart here for us to work with for a moment, and maybe we can illustrate that. Okay, this is a price chart for the Russell 2000, the daily price bars for this market index. It's interesting in working with the Russell from time to time because it tends to lead some of the other markets in terms of big price moves, and it's often a little bit more volatile So it's very interesting to track it from an astrological perspective. This is displayed, by the way, on the software. It's Fibonacci Trader Galactic Trader software that we mentioned earlier, and looking at the universal clock module. And what happens here is it enables us to display the price bars on the chart, but also to correlate a variety of astrological factors, technical indicators, and some proprietary trading tools as well. With this software, I recommend it highly in terms of it being a tool that you can use, not just to decipher eclipses, but to enhance your ability to integrate the astrological dynamics in your trading. Now, let's see, I've kind of pre-selected this. Let's see if I can bring this up so we can take a look at what we're looking at here. This is, okay, what we are looking at right now is the geocentric positions. And we want a fixed angle, and in this case we want to make this a 210.4. This is what we said corresponded to the position of the eclipse in the zodiac. Now what we're looking at here is the angle of the aspect, the value of that. What we're looking for is a set of planetary conjunctions with this specific point. This is the eclipse point where that occurs. Now, when we're looking at the conjunction, it means there's a 0-degree opening between the two. And remember that with our circle here, we run into problems with a lot of computer programs when we start to do things like try to divide by 0. A lot of times it just doesn't like that. And so we're trying to avoid that as we work with this. So basically what we do is add 360 to it, which again takes us full circle around the wheel, but that is a numerical value that the software can handle better. So we'll put in 360 at this point. And then we'll say multiples, put a yes there, and that means that every time this planet that we specify comes back to that point, we're going to flag that each time it occurs. We're not interested in just one occurrence, but as many different times as it occurs. Now, color, of course, gives us the color. We're going to color in some price bars with this. Style, when we click that, it shows a thickness of 6. That means it's going to show up pretty strongly against the fairly heavy price bars that we already have on the chart. Symbol, we don't have a symbol picked here, that we can apply different kinds of symbols to appear over the price bar if we want to flag them in another way. I don't think that's pertinent right now. And then the question of what are we going to track? Well, in order to find some iterations of this before, we need something that moves fairly fast, which means it's going to need to be the Moon, Mercury, Venus, or Mars in tracking this planetary action. And in this case, we're favoring the Moon here, so we just tick the box that says Moon. And this is how we set this up in the Fibonacci Galactic Trader program. Now, a critical factor here is we picked the Moon in this case, but also over on this side, as we looked at that fixed angle, this is the place where we enter the numerical value that coincides to the position of the eclipse, because we want to see how things stack up vis-a-vis that eclipse there. So then this is what it all looks like here. So we'll say exit with that. What we've got here, then we've edited that. Let's see. So we got to show this. Okay. Let's see. What have we done here? Okay. So we exit this. Oh, I think we need to. Well, I think if I can get this closed here. Keep hitting the wrong button. Okay, there we go. So if we say show this, then it will highlight all of the price bars that coincide with this point at which we find this opening or the Moon conjoining the eclipse. So essentially what we've done here is look at lunar returns to the solar eclipse, but all of these occur prior to the solar eclipse. And what's interesting here, as we take a glance at some of these price points, over here, and this is back in November of 2013, we had an exact high in the Russell right on the Moon, triggering the solar eclipse point from almost a year later. So we're getting this effect preceding the eclipse in a very, very strong way here. Then we go over here to late December as well of 2013. Again, we get that trigger right on that point with the solar eclipse over here as we move into late January. This price bar in red here was again the alignment of the moon with that eclipse point, conjoining it again before the eclipse has taken place. By about 9 months or so prior to the actual eclipse, we see an immediate market top and a big sell-off following that. And we see some other examples here. This one over here is in early April of 2014. We have that alignment of the moon with the upcoming eclipse point that is still 6 months away. Then over here, as we get to the 15th of April, we find a very well-defined bottom on this particular price line here, again set up by the lunar transit to that eclipse point before the eclipse has actually occurred. And of course we see other examples. Here's another one. This looks like it is right at the beginning of July of 2014, again well before the time of the eclipse, and that takes the Russell down here into let's see, this would put it right around the 1st of August, and actually we can check this and see what is the date we're looking at here exactly. August the 1st, in fact. Okay. Good guess. So we found a market low, again, right at this point, activated by the moon, aligning in a conjunction with an eclipse point that occurs later on. And then, again, more recently than that here, let's see, this looks like it is on the 29th of August, and just right at the end of that month. Again, this is a day shy of the top of that run, but it coincides with it fairly nicely. So this then is how we use this knowledge of the eclipses, and the fact that the eclipses can have an impact before they actually occur is very significant to us in market timing. Now, obviously, as we track the Russell here, after the date of the eclipse, we can go into the months ahead. And watch the market behavior and see if it satisfies us in terms of consistency of performance. If we're happy with that level of risk that's involved, whatever that proves to be, then in future months we can take trades on this basis with a much higher degree of certainty because we've back-tested and seen how it works in the past. So I wanted to take a moment like this just to share with you this chart using the Galactic Trader software and give you an idea of how we set up some of these dynamics in order to, basically what we've been doing here is just taking a quick visual glance at what the patterns look like and say, oh yeah, it does look like there's some pretty clear correlations here with market turning points and this activation of this eclipse point occurring prior to the actual eclipse itself. So that then is our core consideration, and we could do the same kind of thing with all the other general considerations that we mentioned earlier on. We just wanted to kind of play this particular one out because I think it's one of the weirder concepts associated with eclipses. Until you begin to see it actually demonstrated in the markets like that, it may be a little bit hard to swallow, but once you've seen the effects that are actually there, then typically it's a little easier to assimilate the desirability of incorporating an understanding of eclipses into your trading. Now, when we work with eclipses, we've got another specific technique that we want to mention here. All of these different tools that we've talked about can give us an enhanced understanding of the flow of energy in the markets, especially when we're working with these price point levels. We're after setting particular levels of support and resistance for our trades as we move into them. But specifically with eclipses, one of the things that we do each time there's a solar eclipse is that we review our database of stocks and we look at the first trade horoscopes of those stocks and we try to find ones whose sun conjoins the place that the eclipse occurs. So in this case of this eclipse coming in at 0 degrees of of Scorpio, we want to find stocks that have a first trade date that coincides with that 0 degrees of Scorpio as well. So we're looking for those stocks whose first trade sun, and we're working only with the sun here, is conjoined by the solar eclipse. Now, what we do then is actually use a filtering process at that point. Typically, we'll come up with several dozen stocks that meet this particular criterion, and we're not going to trade all of them. We'll do a series of scans and filters to say, okay, which ones are the more viable candidates here, which ones have the kind of liquidity that we're looking for, and if there's a likelihood of seeing dynamics with the stock or with the company that confirms our bias, then we'll certainly take that into consideration at all. But then once we've done that, what we've done is decided that these are the stocks we're going to trade with the eclipse, and most of the time we're looking at about 4 or 5 trades to enter at that time. We will buy the stock then once there's a price pullback, which will typically occur pretty soon right after the eclipse, if not on the eclipse date itself. So we're looking for a stock then that has the sun conjoining the eclipse. We wait for the eclipse to occur. Typically the stock will pull back in price. That's when we want to pick up some shares in a long position in the stock right around the time of the eclipse. It may take a day or two, sometimes as much as 10 days or so after the eclipse itself for that pullback to occur. But basically, that's our strategy. We want to enter a trade as near as we can to the eclipse date itself, preferably when prices started to consolidate a bit. Once that happens, then we watch very closely the market action. At the same time, just as we've illustrated, we go ahead and put in place a stop loss order, and we put that in with the wherever we have the brokerage account that's handling these trades, saying if we get a price hitting this particular point, sell us out automatically. That's the way the stop loss order works. If we don't get sold out automatically and the stock continues to increase in value, then what we do is use a technique called trailing the stop, so that if the stock is up at the end of a week, 50 cents from where it closed the previous Friday, then we'll raise our stop loss order for that by 50 cents or 40 cents, whatever we feel is appropriate at that point. So that gives us the ability then to move up and lock in profits once a trade turns in a direction that's favorable to us. But it also sets up our expectations for exiting a trade, and that's an important consideration. It's very, very easy to buy stocks. It's a lot harder to figure out when to sell what you've purchased in order to reap the profits that are there for you in the markets. But with this particular strategy, using the solar eclipses, what we do is let the market take us out of the trades that we're in. That is to say, we go ahead and enter the trade at specified price levels, and once the trade is on, then we want to set a stop that's liberal enough to allow for a little bit of wiggle room with the trade. As it moves up in price, we'll raise the stop, and then if it keeps going up, we keep raising the stop. We don't worry at that point, when am I going to sell this? We wait until our stop, which is constantly being increased by increments over time, we wait until that is hit by the price, which then takes us out of the trade automatically. It's an automatic sell order, and we're out of the trade then, and we don't worry about trying to time that in advance. So it makes it very, very much a no-brainer. Once we are in a trade, all we have to do is go back in and take a look at it once a week and recalibrate the stops. And this has proven very reliable for us in trading with eclipses in the past. So let's talk for a moment here before we part company about some additional resources. This is a wide subject area. There are a number of things that you can do with it. We like to be able to apply these principles to effective trading, and hopefully we've illustrated for you some of the ways that this can work, and hopefully you've gotten excited about it, because it really is some very, very useful information. With these additional resources, we've got 3 books that we're recommending here. They go in and out of print and have been reprinted in different editions. The first is by Theodor von Apolzer, who wrote The Canon of Eclipses. This was a book that was published, gosh, I think in the early years of the 20th century or late 19th century. It took a long time to acquire a copy of this. I spent a number of years searching for it. As far as I know, there's not an ebook available or anything of that sort for this volume. If you find a copy, by all means, scrape together the money and get it. The reprint from the original was done by Dover Books. As far as I know, they don't keep it in print on an ongoing basis. But just kind of keep an ear to the ground there. See if you can find von Oppolzer, because it's marvelous in terms of having drawings and illustrations of eclipses going back to ancient history and giving you that as a point of reference. The second book that we recommend here is by Fred Espenach. Espenach is one of the chief NASA scientists who works with eclipses, and he's written a number of very fine books on eclipses from a purely empirical standpoint. He's not an astrologer, doesn't talk about the astrological meanings of any of the stuff. He's just measuring the eclipses, seeing when they occur, trying to provide resources on the NASA website and through his own work, and to help turn people on to the possibilities that are there. Fred's book is called The 50-Year Canon of Solar Eclipses, 1986 to 2013. Then let's see, we've got the final book here that we want to mention by Bill Meridian. My good friend Bill Meridian has written a number of fine books on astro trading. Of course, planetary stock trading is his magnum opus there. Recommend that you have that, but also his book called The Predictive Power of Eclipse Paths. Bill was a student of the late Charles Jane, who did some marvelous work with eclipse paths with his work with mundane astrology. That's what is focused on with this book by Bill. Worth tracking down a copy of that as well, because it has information that you just won't find anywhere else as you try to study eclipses and their impact. We wanted to at least hint on about it here today. We're not going to be able to read the entire book to you, but it's a very useful resource. So pay attention, see if you can get von Oppolzer and or Espenach. The difference with Espenach is it's a very short time frame, relatively speaking, with eclipses, but it does cover the current eclipses. The maps in that book published by NASA from Espenach, by the way, are marvelous quality and really enhance the study of the eclipse actions. But see about getting copies of all these if you want to pursue further study in this area of eclipses and the markets. Then, in addition to the fact we mentioned earlier here that we have the newly published book, The Solar Eclipse of October 2014, Its Impact on the Markets, by yours truly and my colleague Jim Cummins. And of course, as I think we did mention, this is a book that's very comprehensive in its scope. It's about 105, 106 pages long, and it deals with the eclipse path relative to this current eclipse and what it means about where it takes place. We also have information on Saros Series 153. In fact, charts and explanations for every one of the eclipses in this Saros series. That's one of the benefits of having a fairly young Saros series. We only have to go back through, I think, 10 or 12 iterations there to get all the eclipses accounted for, so we could figure out what was going on then in world history, in geopolitics, and so forth with that occurrence. Then, mentioning of course, beyond the Saros series, the first thing we mentioned is the geopolitics. That's an application of some of the Saros series knowledge, but also from a more general application, just paying attention to what the impacts are in terms of the relationship between the eclipse chart and the national charts for various countries. Lunar returns, we mentioned the lunar return tool with solar eclipses. That's also included as an integral part of the book on the Solar Eclipse of October 2014. We cover the lunar returns all the way past the next eclipse that comes up. The next eclipse comes in March of next year. I think we cover these lunar returns up through May or June. So we've got a market forecast on a running basis, month by month, for about 8 months or so into the future in this particular publication. Then, of course, we've got a number of financial charts that we take a look at in connection with valuing our experience in the markets. We like to see how this eclipse relates to the charts of various entities. So we have a number of those that we track there. Then, in addition to that, we look at the eclipse anticium. This is something we haven't mentioned. It's the solstice point associated with that position of the eclipse. It activates an additional point in the zodiac, and so we pay attention to alignments with that anticium point as well as with the eclipse point itself. There's also what we call the two eclipse midpoint. That is to say, the midpoint in time and in the zodiac between this current eclipse and the next one coming up. That is an additional sensitive point as well. So we pay attention to those kinds of things in this report. Let's see here. The anticium we mentioned. Oh, the monthly forecast, again, based on the lunar return activity. We do give a month-by-month forecast for the U.S. markets, at least, throughout this book. And then the activation points that occur. These are the transiting points to all of the planetary positions within the eclipse horoscope itself. So we might find a particular transit of a planet, the Mercury in the sky, conjoining with Uranus in the chart for the solar eclipse, and so that's part of what we have to understand in the way that we process this information. And of course, those activation points, there are, I think it's like 7 or 8 pages of them, so it covers quite a span calendar-wise for you to be able to work with. Very, very valuable information if you're interested in tracking the eclipse impacts, well ahead of schedule. So let's see, the activation point. So the eclipse stock picks, we mentioned this methodology for using the conjunction with the first trade sun of a stock. The question is, what are the other factors that are involved, and what kind of attitude is there, and how do things function in the broader market environment? So we get very, very rigorous with our back testing and examination of the potential stocks before we recommend them. The ones that we put in the eclipse report here are the Solar Eclipse of October 2014. Certainly go into a lot more detail for you there in terms of understanding what it is we're going to trade, where the current price is, how we're graphing planetary price lines for support and resistance, etc. Of course, we have the interactions with things like NGOs, in this case central banks as well, some information on their activities and how to gauge that. Then on top of that, we've got information on commodities and precious metals included in the study that we got to share while we were there. So it's a very, very dense volume of information that can be used for many, many months to come. It's not just about what happens on this one date. Then, of course, we have this available now. As of just a couple of days ago. It is available at Amazon.com. If you'd like to go there to purchase a copy, they can expedite the shipping to you. Usually takes about 2-3 days to get delivered when it comes from Amazon. Then in addition to that, we have an ebook version of this monograph on the Solar Eclipse of October 2014, its impact on the markets. That ebook is available when you get it. When you purchase it, it's an instant download. So within a few minutes, you can have it on your computer, or then transfer it to your Kindle or whatever you like to do to be able to read that ebook edition at your convenience. That is available at the publisher's website. We're not using the Amazon Kindle program with this book because it made it a little bit too expensive. We got a much reduced price here for the ebook through the publisher, which is harmonicresearchassociates.com. So all one word, harmonicresearchassociates.com will take you to information from the publisher about getting that ebook directly. And we have an extra bonus here for you as well. you can save $50 off the regular price on the ebook by applying a coupon code. Now, the way this works is you go to the website, you find the ebook that you want to purchase, in this case the one on the Solar Eclipse of October 2014. You click the order button on that, it takes you to a checkout page, and then on the checkout page there's a blank to fill in a coupon code and saying something like, do you have a coupon code? If that's the case, then you fill in that blank with this word. It's all caps, all one word, sun shadow, SUNSHADOW, again all caps, and put that in the coupon code section, and will automatically knock $50 off the price of the ebook edition of this really high-powered report that I think can make a very, very significant difference in your ability to profit from trading eclipses. So that coupon code then is our bonus gift for you. Hope you do take advantage of that. There's still a couple of days left here before the occurrence of the solar eclipse, but even if you wait until after the eclipse to get to your copy of this monograph on the solar eclipse of October 2014, I think you'll find it very worthwhile, simply because there are so many other dates and interactions that connect with this eclipse. And of course we have the trading forecast for months ahead of time, as well as those specific eclipse activation points. Having that work done on the lunar return makes a very, very positive adjunct to the whole process. So that's why we wanted to be sure to offer this as an extra gift for you, just to thank you for taking the time to join us here for this webinar. So I know everybody's schedule is busy. I felt it very, very important to have this information in your hands so that you can make intelligent decisions about trading this eclipse. So do want to take time to thank you so much for joining us here for this session. I think you will find the information valuable. Appreciate getting your feedback. We're not going to keep you any later here this evening, though. In order to do that, you should see a box somewhere around the screen there. If you'll type in those questions there, we'll get to them and answers to you via email as promptly as possible there. But again, thanks for joining us for this event, and we wish you all the best of luck when you trade the eclipses. I mean, we've got tools that work well and work reliably, but having the wind at your back and getting an expression of good luck along the way certainly doesn't hurt matters at all, and we're not going to object to that at all if you can add it to your experience. In fact, I heartily desire that for you. So again, thanks so much for joining us. This is Tim Bost with FinancialCyclesWeekly.com, and we've been talking about how to trade with eclipses. Remember to pick up your copy of that new report either at the publisher at HarmonicResearchAssociates.com or via Amazon in the paper-bound edition at Amazon.com. So again, thanks for joining us. Have a great evening, everybody, and have a wonderful, wonderful solar eclipse.